Thank you everyone for joining the session. Good morning again. And welcome to this room. The session name is Updated Statistics for the Space Economy from 2017 to 2022. I remember if you have questions for our presenter, please type them in the chat box and we will address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Without more hesitance, it's an honor now to introduce Dr. Patrick Georgi, that has worked as an economist in the Bureau of Economic Analysis for 8 years. And Patrick, do you want me to read your full bio? Yeah, is that okay with you?
Sure. Yeah, if you feel like it. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So during his tenure, Patrick has worked on multiple economic accounts, including the space economy account, the digital economy account, outdoor recreation account, and trading value-added statistics. He is also involved in the production of BEA's GDP by industry accounts, most notably working with the non-durable goods manufacturing sector. And currently, Patrick's primary duties focus on maintaining and improving BEA's space economy estimates. Finally, Patrick holds a bachelor's degree in economics and international studies from Virginia Tech and a master's degree in international economics from American University. So yeah, the seminar is all yours. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Mauricio. Yeah, thank you all for joining my conversation today. I am not an astronaut, so sorry for that. Dr. Proctor definitely put on a show that's going to be a little hard to follow. That was very interesting this morning. But hopefully you're all at least a little bit as excited about economic statistics as I am. So we will go into that, and today I'm going to be talking about how we quantify the space economy from an economic standpoint in the United States at the Bureau of Economic Analysis. So this is kind of the outline of what I'll go through today. I'll start with a brief overview of some of our statistics that we create at the Bureau of Economic Analysis. I'll move into an overview of the methodology that we utilize to create our space economy statistics. Then I'll move on to discussing the results of our latest publication, estimates that span the years 2017 to 2022. And then I'll wrap up discussing some of our next steps and future research and what's on the horizon for the BEA space economy statistics. So for anyone who's not familiar with what the Bureau of Economic Analysis does, we are most well known for putting out macroeconomic statistics on the US economy, first and foremost. And our probably most familiar, most popular statistic that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of is GDP, or gross domestic product. And this is essentially a measure of how much value is created in the economy in a given period. So for example, here we have our first quarter of 2024 estimate from the Bureau of Economic Analysis that real GDP increased 1.4% in the quarter. Another set of estimates that we produce at the BEA that I think are very interesting are GDP by industry statistics. So this is where we take our national level GDP and gross output figures, and we break it down by industry so that you can kind of get a more detailed look at which sectors, which industries are contributing the most to the economy in a given period. So this graph here just kind of displays some of that GDP by industry information. And this is, again, for the first quarter of 2024. So for that 1.4% increase we saw in the same quarter, that retail, trade, construction, finance and insurance, and healthcare and social assistance were some of the larger industries that contributed to that 1.4% increase. So yeah, these GDP by industry statistics just give a really neat detailed look into kind of the inner workings of the economy, as opposed to just looking at the total US top line GDP figure. And underlying these GDP by industry statistics, at BEA, we utilize what's called an input-output methodology of accounting. This is an international standard of national accounting that many countries use to create their GDP statistics and a lot of their national economic statistics. So it's not just something that we use in the US and at BEA. And as the name suggests, these input-output estimates, these tables that are produced, show for industries what products and services that they take in as inputs in order to create a unit of output. And these are really, really interesting tables. They're very detailed, so they can be a little bit overwhelming, but ultimately just kind of shows the flow of goods and services and products through an economy as they move between industries that use them as inputs, and then ultimately to the industry that produces it as a final output measure. So all of this background, I know this isn't specifically talking about space yet, but this is kind of the basis that we developed our space economy statistics off of. And I think it makes our estimates a little bit unique compared to maybe some other like private industry reports on similar space economy figures, in that we start with this very, very granular level of detail, following like specific products and specific services as they flow through the economy. And why this is important is that we can even track goods and services that you may not initially think would be a part of like kind of what you would think of in terms of space economy. This may be something like healthcare research. If a company is primarily participating in like healthcare related research, they may not be listed as a space company, and that may not always be captured. But if they happen to be doing some kind of research that's related to maybe medical studies being done in space on the space station, or something about healthcare and medical research being done for astronauts, things like that. While that may not be captured, if you're just looking at the top line, what is the business primarily functioning, doing, we can capture that activity as it relates to the space economy. So that's just a little bit of background on how we build up these statistics from the ground up. So yeah, how do we determine what is included in our space economy statistics? We use, again, we didn't just create a list and make up on our own what we consider to be part of the space economy. We used an international kind of methodology that has already existed from the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. They've put out some guidelines into measuring the space economy. And then we've also met with a lot of special subject matter experts, private industry experts, government experts in the space area to create a comprehensive list of goods and services that we believe fall into the realm of space economy. And broadly, we believe that they fall into three categories. The first being any goods and services that are used in space or directly support those that are used in space. These are probably like the more obvious kind of big ticket items that you would think of, such as space vehicles, so like rockets, space shuttles, satellites, those kind of things that directly, go into space. But these would also include things that support those items, such as the actual construction of a launch pad that a rocket uses to actually get off the ground. Even things like the insurance that covers these launches. If a launch gets scrapped, there's insurance that covers some of that. So a lot of these auxiliary kind of services and goods that you may not think of directly, but they do fall into the economy. The second requirement is a good or service that requires direct input from space to function or directly support those that do. Again, these are goods and services that don't go directly into space, but essentially would not exist if it wasn't for the fact that it was sending or receiving something from space. So these are things like GPS transmitters, satellite telecommunications, like satellite dishes, satellite internet receivers, things like that. And the third criteria are goods and services that are associated with studying space. This is largely what, in our estimates, research and development makes up a large portion of this. But even things like, if you have a local planetarium or observatory that you can go to, those are included with studying space, even all the way down to the education of space-related, materials, aerospace engineering, astronomy, all of those kinds of things that are associated with studying space. We attempt to capture all of this activity to get everything that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for trying to study or go or come to space. So like I said, because we start with this very granular level, we are able to track these products wherever they move throughout the economy. And what we found through our estimates is that the space economy really does have its fingers in pretty much the entire economy. Everything from the direct manufacturing of those kinds of space vehicles, rockets, satellites, things like that, to the government research. We even capture any military related defense spending on things that go into or come from space. And then, like I said, even things you may not think of, like construction, the construction of launch pads and space facilities, all of these kinds of things we capture. So the space economy spans pretty much the entire US economy, which is very interesting. And because it's so widespread, I do have a list of some of our data sources. Primarily, our data source is our in-house BEA statistics, like I mentioned, the GDP by industry, and our input-output accounting tables. But because space is very specific and scientific, we do utilize a lot of other data sources to supplement our own data sources to really try and give us as accurate of a picture as we can for these more specialized goods and services. So moving on to the results, just a few months ago, we published our latest findings back in June of this year. And our estimates for that release cover the years of 2017 to 2022. So just to show kind of the contribution of the space economy in 2022, which is our latest year, we have a couple of main statistics that we like to showcase at BEA, those being gross output and value added. And the way you can think about the differences between gross output and value added, gross output can kind of be considered like the revenue or the sales, like the final figure that you say you produced value-wise in a given period in let's say 2022. Value added is when you take that total kind of final sales figure, if you will, and then you remove the cost of the goods and the inputs and services that it took you to actually produce that output. So the difference between what it cost you and what you sold it for, that is like that added value that you contributed to the economy. And value added is often interchanged with the term GDP. So we can kind of consider value added and GDP interchangeable for all intents and purposes. So in 2022, the space economy contributed $232 billion to total US gross output and $132 billion to value added or GDP. It also contributed 347,000 jobs in 2022 in the private sector. And as well in the private sector, it contributed $54 billion in employee compensation, which can be considered like wages and salaries, but as well as benefits that employees receive from their employers. And to put this in perspective, in 2022, that $132 billion of GDP represents about 0.5% of total GDP in 2022, which may not sound like it's huge, 0.5%, but to put that a little bit in perspective, the entire agriculture sector in the entire United States is just around 1%. So still 0.5% for one sector is pretty significant, to say the least. And we can kind of compare these results for the space economy to what was happening in the total US economy in the same period. So if you look at the second column, the space economy growth rate in 2022, that shows the growth of these estimates from 2021 to 2022. For real gross output, it increased 2.9%, which was faster than the entire US economy grew in the same period, 2.1%. and real GDP of the space economy grew 2.3%, which was also a little bit faster than the total US economy growth rate of 1.9% in the same period. To show kind of the breakdown of who is contributing to the space economy, there's a handful of sectors that are really the main contributors to the space economy. In 2022, the manufacturing sector actually became the largest contributor to the space economy, just over 25% of total GDP came from the manufacturing sector in the space economy. The information sector actually used to be the largest, but we have been seeing declines primarily in the broadcasts, satellite TV, things like that. The figures for those have been steadily declining as people have had more access to broadband and streaming services and things like that. They were relying a little bit less on satellite TV, so we've seen a decline in the information sector where that data falls. Of note, the government sector does contribute a lot to space economy GDP, and this is everything that is directly produced by a government like agency, like NASA or NOAA, or even military spending is also included in this. So the new Space Force or any activity that like Air Force and the Navy are doing with satellites and things like that, we are capturing that as well in the government portion of these estimates. So just a quick look at the trend over the periods that we published from these are the growth rates from 2018 to 2022. We do notice, I think most notably, the 2020 and 2021 periods were kind of the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the overall economy saw some pretty harsh downward pressures and downward growth rates during these periods. And the space economy was not immune to that downward pressure that happened during the pandemic. So 2022, the overall growth rate being positive 2.3% for the total space economy was a really nice upturn from the previous 2 years of declining growth. So we are seeing a rebound in the space economy in 2022. And this was largely driven this year by the government sector. Government is often a little bit shielded from sometimes the downward effects of downward economic trends. They're a little bit slower to react than private industries are when there's an economic downturn. So it's not surprising the government sets their budgets at the beginning of the year, so that that's how it kind of is shielded from these downturn events. And then just kind of, again, looking at the breakdown of how the space economy contributes to employment and compensation and which sectors are contributing the most. Of the total 347,000 jobs that the space economy contributed to in the private sector, manufacturing represented 108,000 of those jobs, followed closely by the information sector, which provided 76,000 jobs, and the wholesale trade sector contributed 75,000 jobs. And like we see in output and value added, manufacturing and information sector are huge, probably the two largest sectors contributing to the space economy. And in jobs, we see that as well. Manufacturing and information together, just those two sectors, represent over half of the total employment and compensation in the space economy. So that's pretty much what I have for the data side of things. Just wrapping up here, we are planning to produce our next set of these estimates early next year, and that will cover the years. It'll be nice because we're actually going back further in time. So we'll be producing estimates from 2012 all the way through 2023. We do have a little bit of lag on our estimates. I know it's already 2024 and we'll be coming out with 2023 next year. And that's just kind of at the limit that we have of our source data, which is a good thing because our source data is so detailed and accurate that it takes a while to gather it. We use very detailed Census Bureau data as kind of our groundwork. So there's a little bit of lag, but we are working on accelerating that release. So our next publication is actually going to come out about 3 months earlier than we released it this year. So we're working on getting it a little bit more timely. And then we're also at the BEA, we're looking at exploring producing state level estimates for the space economy. There's been some interest from our users to produce that, to see, where a lot of this space activity is located, as well as potentially increasing the timing of our release as well. We're also there's some research going on to look at a little bit more detailed price effects on manufacturing of satellites, which have been a little bit tricky to nail down. And then we've been collaborating with a variety of different government agencies and private enterprise groups to kind of explore new ideas, get exposure to the space economy, to showcase what we're doing, how we're trying to measure this, and then receive feedback for ourselves. We're always looking to improve our estimates. So we always appreciate hearing feedback from these groups, but also from any data user. I get questions from students all the time. So we love hearing from our data users to get questions about what we're doing at the Bureau of Economic Analysis. And then, yeah, just putting up some information here, or if you want to look more into this topic, there's a link. I believe these slides will be being published with the presentation, but you can go to our website at bea.gov. That's B as in boy, ea.gov. And if you just search there, space economy on that website, or if you just search BEA space economy, you should be able to find a link to our space economy homepage. And then we do have a direct email inbox. If you would like to reach out directly, it would probably go straight to me. And I'm happy, always excited to have questions from anybody about this topic. And our email address there is spaceeconomy@bea.gov. So yeah, thank you all. I think we're going to open it up to questions if anybody has any. I know I probably rattled through a lot of numbers there very quickly, but I'm happy to hear any questions from anybody in the audience.
Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. We already have a comment in the chat. I don't know if you want to read it by yourself. Yes, we invite all the attendees to write down your questions and comments. We have 9 more minutes. Yeah.
Let's see. I have to find that chat.
It's in the Zoom window in the it's below, probably also in your window, but I can read it if you want to in the meanwhile. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, this is from Bert Chapman. Thank you. He says, I'm writing a book on the civilian space strategy and military doctrine literature of the US and various allies, which will include space industry data. I have used BEA resources in one of the US chapters. So yeah, pretty much that's the comment. And then we have another 2 questions. The first one is, what is the trend for the space private sector?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. First, thanks to Bert. Yeah, I always love to hear that people are using our data. I think it's very interesting, and it's always exciting to meet people who use our data. We have a ton of BEA. There's so much data. We explore lots of special topics, and the space economy is one of our newer ones. And then to try and answer the question on what the trend is, I think, like in this graph or in this slide I show in this middle column here, there's kind of an average annual growth rate, so you can kind of get an idea of the trend from 2017 to 2022. And there is some downturn in like the average annual growth rate. For example, here real gross output on average was declining 0.9%. And on average, real value added was declining 1.7%. However, it is worthy to note when we talk about real, so I have these 2 rows for each statistic here, gross output and then real gross output, value added and real value added. When we say real value added and real gross output at BEA, that means that we're controlling that estimate for inflation essentially. So we're removing the effects of inflation to get a kind of real indicator of what's going on. So the very strong inflationary trends we've seen over the last couple of years have had kind of a downward effect on on our estimates. So while on average there may be some downward trends, you know, there is some inflationary impact on that as well. But also, I think to see that 2022 there was a strong rebound is you know of note. I think there is definitely a lot of emerging technologies that's coming up and emerging activity going on in the space sector. So you know, we don't do any future looking forecasts at BEA. We look at existing data, so we don't forecast anything. But it is likely that this sector will definitely continue to. Let's see, I saw another question about, can I speak to how this data is gathered for non-publicly traded companies? And I think that's a very good question. So we use a lot of our source data comes from the Census Bureau, and the Census Bureau puts out every 5 years a very detailed, what they call the economic census. And a lot of people know of the Census Bureau as the once every 10-year, like personal population census. But they do an economic census as well. And every company that submits data or submits taxes basically is required to fill out this economic survey, this economic census. So the Census Bureau has data on basically every, you know, every company, every enterprise in the United States. And we use that data and we aggregate it all up by industry and by commodity. So that's how we're able to capture the activity of non-publicly traded companies. Let's see some other questions here. What is the year of the data? So yeah, our last release just covered 2017 to 2022. But our next release, which should be early next year, we're aiming for Q1 of 2025. We'll be publishing estimates that span 2012 to 2023, which I think will be very exciting to get a really, you know, almost 11-year time span, and to look at some longer trends than what we were able to look at this year. There's another question about how the BEA handles foreign produced equipment that's incorporated into final manufactured products. And that is a good question. We do, at BEA, we do have data on imports and exports. So a lot of that those imported goods and services, they get captured. Generally, those would probably be, you know, inputs to final products. But yeah, we use Customs and Border Patrol data on everything that's coming and going in the economy, both, you know, internationally as well. Yes, so yeah, 2023 data will be coming out next year. Economic census comes out for years ending in 2 and 7. It does not include data on individual firms. It doesn't include it on the firms, but it is at the establishment level. So data is collected at like a particular establishment. They report on what they're selling and what they're making. So we do have that data. And there's a question about NASA and Department of Defense being a customer. So funding startups to have reliable information on just commercial entities. So yeah, we do break out our estimates. If you go to our website and actually look at the data tables, this was a little bit of a summarized version of it, but we do break out our estimates by private enterprise statistics, and then at the bottom is where we list the government portion, and then we even do further split out our government into defense versus non-defense spending. So defense would be, yes, you're like your DoD, your Space Force, and then we would have our civilian government economic activity as well included in that, and that's broken out, which is very nice. Far, and it looks like we're close to time, but again, if anybody has any further questions, we have, you know, that email inbox. You can reach out to someone at BEA.
Perfect. So thank you so much to Patrick Gregory. I think you have a little delay, or I don't know if it's just on my side. Can you hear me, Patrick? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah, hopefully that's not my
Awesome.
internet.
Yeah, so thanks to you, and thank you everyone for attending this session. And yeah, we will have a short break. Our next session will begin in 10 minutes. Okay. So thank you for everything, for your presentation, and to all of you for your questions and comments. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all very much.